Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming out to today's session. This year, we have already seen a few elections whose outcome was so important for the future of the European project and of the EU at large. In the United Kingdom, the snap elections may go down in history as one of the most decisive defeats for the Conservative Party. In France, Emmanuel Macron founded his own party and ascended to the presidency of France. First try. Geert Wilders here in the Netherlands tried and failed to join the ranks of political people in power who are tough on immigration and really soft on their hair. But this election season is not over yet. We got one more coming for us, and it's approaching fast. I'm speaking, of course, of Germany. Now, some would say that the polls suggest that next Sunday will be a mere reaffirmation of Angela Merkel, the seemingly eternal chancellor of Germany. But not only are polls known to be imperfect predictors of the future, I'm looking at you, America, but they also don't reveal the full picture. For instance, what will it mean for Germany, with all of its history, that come Sunday we will likely have a nationalist party in the Bundestag? What will it mean for the European Union, an institution that many say is crumbling and broken beyond repair? And perhaps most interestingly, what will all of this mean for the role of Germany in the world? To help us answer these and a lot more questions, we have two fantastic guests with us today, and we are thrilled to be able to announce that we have two guests from Germany and the Netherlands. Ursula Münch is the head of the Academy for Political Education in Tutzing in Germany. She is also a senior lecturer for political science at the Bundeswehr University in Munich. Michelle de Waard is an independent economic journalist who in her past has written for the FD, and she is the author of a book called A Political Biography of Angela Merkel. During the interview, you will have some opportunities to ask your questions. Now, when that happens, you do not have to shout. We have a microphone in the back there. Olaf, yes, Olaf, wave. That's Olaf right there. And he will come to your aid, and he will get you the microphone, so you don't have to shout. All right. My name is Lennart Roos. I will be joined on stage. I am already joined on stage by Valentina Janera. And please now help me in welcoming our two guests, Ursula Münch and Michelle de Waard.
Please have a seat. Ms. Münch, Ms. de Waard, welcome on my behalf as well. I'm glad that you're here. Let me start with you, Ms. de Waard. In your political biography on Angela Merkel, you refer to the German Chancellor as the uncrowned leader of Europe. What fascinates you so much about her person?
I was so fascinated that I wrote a book because she came out of the blue, the political blue in the eastern part of Germany when she was quite young, in her 30s. And then within a relatively short time, she became chairwoman of the Christian Democratic Party. She became chancellor for 12 years. She is now chancellor. And she became unofficially the leader of the Western world. She hates to be called like that, but at least I must say that the last weeks, the way she interferes again in Ukraine and the North Korean crisis and stuff like that, she's doing her utmost.
Yes.
Ms. Münch, you're the head of the Academy for Political Education in Tutzing. I already hinted at the fact in the opening speech that a lot of people see Angela Merkel as having already won the elections on Sunday. But let's be real, there is another candidate, Martin Schulz. And when he announced his candidacy, the SPD, the Social Democrats, saw a surge in their polls. But that didn't last very long. Could you talk a little bit about why that happened, in your opinion?
So why he didn't have this 30% for a longer time?
Exactly.
So that's your question. So that's a very good question. All German journalists talk about it, and they always ask Schulz too. For him, it's a very inconvenient question, of course. So there are different reasons. I think 30% for the Social Democrats, that wasn't still normal anymore. So it was just this effect of the new one, of the new politician coming from the European Parliament. So probably it was the idea of the new one. And so it was this certain kind of Martin Schulz hype. There was a lot of ideas of Social Democrats starting with a new person and a new kind of making politics. But in the end, after some weeks, they were faced with the central question for the Social Democrats: with whom does he want to form a coalition? And we had these 3 elections on the Länder level, on the states level, on the from the German Länder, and we had 3 elections there. And the last election was the one in the biggest German state in North Rhine-Westphalia, and so we had these 3 times we had the experience that the German electorate is not very much amused about a so-called left-green coalition. And
So a coalition between the left-wing,
Yes.
almost socialist party, the Social Democrats, and the Green Party.
Right. But for him, it's the problem to give a better answer. So the German electorate isn't very much interested in a coalition with a so-called left party, with a Linke Partei, because they are, for example, they have a very rigid position towards the federal armed forces,
Right.
and quite a socialist a point of view. And the problem is what to answer if the people ask, with whom do you want to form a coalition? Because the Social Democrats and Green are not enough. So there's only one other option, and that's, again, the Grand Coalition.
Yeah. So you're saying that the coalition partner is the problem of the SPD.
Yes.
Now let's turn to the elections more broadly. On the TV debate between Angela Merkel and Martin Schulz, we saw that it revolved mostly about immigration. About 50% of the whole debate were centered around that topic. However, is that really what the German electorate is voting on this Sunday?
So probably the issue that they only talked or nearly talked only about refugee migration policy, so that wasn't the fault of the candidates, that was the fault of the moderators in this so-called duel, which wasn't a duel. But I think, so we have 2 different ways. So we have a lot of, I think, probably many people in Germany, they really have a problem with the idea, how do we go on with migration policy? So it's a big issue on the one hand. But on the other hand, so for example, it's the biggest problem for the electorate of the alternative, of the Alternative für Deutschland, the right-wing party. But it's not a topic the people talk so lot about. It's the topic which the people make, they have a certain kind of fear about it, but they don't talk so much about it. If you hear the other discussions in the television, or if you read the letters to the newspapers or whatever, so the people, a big issue is, of course, housing, for example, the prices of housing. So we have extremely high level of pricing in the big cities, and that's issues, of course, that people talk about caring about older people, things like that.
These are all things we'll get back to later on in the interview. The economy.
He tried to make this an issue, Martin Schulz, but he didn't succeed with it.
Okay.
Interesting.
Well, Mr. Ward, Angela Merkel has been chancellor now for 12 years already. Already 4 years ago, she used the words "Sie kennen mich," so you know me, to gain support. Now she's again running for chancellor. Do you think that people vote for her out of a need for consistency, or is there more to the Merkel train?
I think in a very unstable world, Merkel is quite a stable leader. I think that's the main reason why they want to continue with Lady Merkel. The thing is, you mustn't forget that Germany is also, it's the 8th year of economic growth, which is extraordinary. The unemployment is falling each month a little bit. To be honest, you must say there in Germany they developed the same situation as in the Netherlands. On the lower part of the labor market, you have 5 till 7 million very unsecure jobs, mini jobs. Onze quasi ZZP'ers.
So is that the kind of sphere in society that Martin Schulz is trying to tap into? Are these the people that he wants to win?
Yeah, but he doesn't. Basically, I think he's doing a bad campaign because the issues are there. The issues are there. It's also in the inequality in Germany is much severe than with us. If you walk in big cities, you really see quite a lot of poor people.
But why do you think he's not doing a good job?
Yeah, well, he's not a very strong candidate. That's of course also one of the reasons that Merkel is still going strong. She is a strong character and a strong politician, but one of the reasons is that the SPD, the Social Democrats, didn't offer so very much strong candidates.
Well, on the other hand, you were already talking about the German economy, which is doing very well. I mean, we've seen also there is a large budget surplus within the German economy. At the same time, we see that infrastructure, schools, roads, they're crumbling. Why is Germany not investing more of its saving into critical infrastructure, for instance?
Yeah, basically, I just wrote my column for the Financiële Dagblad about this topic because it should be the big plan of the next coalition, whoever is in it, because the last 10 years, the German Minister of Finance, the cabinet, made a lot of effort to diminish the deficit. Of course, when you criticize all the Euro countries, you have to be the best man, the best scholar. So,
well, on the other hand, this is also a huge problem, isn't it? I mean, if everyone in the Eurozone is austere at the same time, so Germany is saving, whereas also Spain and Greece have to save, who is going to spend the money?
Yeah, well, Germany is definitely going to spend some money if you analyze what politicians are telling. That doesn't mean that the surplus, the trade surplus, will diminish very severely, because lots of those investments that are needed in building, in schools, in infrastructure, roads, bridges, of course, there are also European companies involved, but also German companies. So the Minister of Finance did a lot of counting, but he assured President Trump, who is very keen on the German trade surplus.
So what is the strategy there? What is Germany thinking by saving and saving more money? Is there a grander strategy behind this? Because some are now saying that this might hurt Germany in the long run.
Well, a strategy, no.
I think there is a strategy. We have the demographic perception. So I think that's the main strategy. At least it's the argument of the conservatives. And probably it's not such a bad argument, because it's always also the younger generation. They say we don't want to only to have your debts, our debts of my generation. Right. So I think that's the main argument, to say we have to have a look also at the younger generation, and we have to not to give more money, to spend more money than we earn. But on the other side, of course, the left-wing parties, they say, of course, it's important also for the younger generation to invest. So, but you shouldn't forget that we are a federal country. So of course, I come from Bavaria. So in Bavaria, the bridges are still functioning, and the public transportation too. The argument is that it makes a difference which government you have on the level of the state governments.
Okay, but would you then say that because the program of the SPD is way more focused on spending more money on critical infrastructure, schooling, and so on, would you, for example, say that Martin Schulz would be the better candidate for the European Union as a whole, for the Eurozone as a whole?
No, definitely not. No. Martin Schulz wants to spend a lot of money, and he didn't do some proper counting. So how do you want to invest in schools and stuff like that, which is important? But he is mentioning figures that for which he doesn't have. He doesn't talk about higher taxes severely.
Yeah.
No,
But
I
you
think
could
the better
increase
candidate.
the public debt, right? He
Pardon?
could increase the public debt and thereby.
He will definitely increase the public debt, and that's not very smart. Germany still has a very big debt, and that, that was, of course, one of the consequences of the German reunion. That did cost a lot of money.
Ms. Münch, do you share this assessment?
It's of course, it's a point of view. It depends from the point of view whether you say with regard to the future whether Martin Schulz will be the better for the European Union. I think what you can say definitely, so probably he's very interested in the European Union as well as Angela Merkel, so I don't think that there is much a difference. I think the difference would be the third party to form perhaps a coalition. I think it's interesting to have a look when they don't form the next grand coalition, the Social Democrats and the Conservatives, like we had it in the last 4 years, and if Angela Merkel and the Conservatives will have perhaps a new smaller coalition together with the Liberals, then we have an issue perhaps for the European integration, because the Liberals, they have another point of view with regard to the European integration. So they try to find a position between the Conservatives and the right-wing party, the Liberals, and they try to do it with regard to two positions, with regard to the refugee policy and with regard to European integration. And they would really make the difference. The difference between the Social Democrats and Angela Merkel or the Conservatives with regard to European integration, I wouldn't say that it's such a big difference. The difference is between the two bigger, larger parties and the Liberals.
As we're talking about this, you just mentioned the Alternative für Deutschland, the Alternative for Germany, the Nationalist Party.
The so-called
the so-called Alternative for Germany. They are likely to enter into the Bundestag on Sunday.
Yes.
What does this mean for Germany? Again, perhaps in the bigger picture with its history.
So that's the question we are all dealing about the last week. So it's interesting. So everybody knows that there will be a parliamentary group in the Bundestag, and they will be probably the third largest parliamentary group in the German Bundestag, starting from not to be member of the parliament and becoming the third largest parliamentary group. And it's quite interesting that we had this discussion. Of course, we don't know how they will behave. We have certain ideas because they are already represented in quite a large number of state parliaments, so we have a certain idea, and we don't know how to, of course, that will be the discussion starting on Monday and not stopping on Friday next week, unfortunately.
Mr. Ward, now that we're talking about this, I have a quote here from you. In the Historic, you said that since Merkel took office in 2005, Germany has become a more humane, generous, and tolerant place. Where do you see these changes, and how do you reconcile this with the rise of nationalism?
Well, of course, you see it in her migration policy, because she sticks to kind of open door policy. Although you must be honest that since that enormous influx of migrants, they also have become more strict around the borders. But she is very aware for a couple of years now of the rise of the AfD, the Alternative für Deutschland, because that was being created, that party, by a couple of people that left the CDU. They wanted to quit the euro. They didn't want to help Greece. And Merkel did her utmost, that was the other argument, did her utmost to keep the Eurozone together. She also, by the way, did her utmost to keep, the British in, but that, unfortunately, that didn't succeed. But she makes a very big distinction between the people that are really talking those hate talks, you know,
Yeah.
and that are very racist, and there are quite a lot of neo-Nazi groups that see the AFD as their political arm. And to be, if you look at Gauland, one of the two candidates, the last weeks, he openly uses a kind of neo-Nazi terminology,
Yeah.
which
In Germany.
is,
Well,
yeah,
Right?
Yeah. Well, Martin Schulz also said that the AfD actually profited from the fact that Merkel stripped any substantial component from the CDU. And you also mentioned that the AfD was actually founded by people from the CDU. Do you think Merkel went too much against her own party line and thereby furthered the rise of the AfD?
I think that's too easy an argument. In the Netherlands, we have quite a big group of, radical left and radical right. In France, fortunately, there is a lot of quarrels now within the party of Marine Le Pen, but that lots of people voted for her. And in Great Britain, there is also quite a resentment against migrants, also migrants from Poland. I mean, that doesn't have anything to do with Africans or.
One thing.
I think the argument is too easy. I think Merkel is quite principled. She's one of the most unideological leaders, but she is very pragmatic, but also principled in a couple of areas. So the migrant issue is one, the Energiewende. You can think a lot about that, but at least it's an Energiewende that she tries to organize.
Ms. Munch, currently the AfD is polling at 11%. Now that is a lot more than we would have ever expected a few years ago. But in comparison to other European countries, the Nationalist Party in Germany isn't quite doing so well. So my question for you, as the head of the Academy for Political Education, is to what extent did political education perhaps prevent the nationalists from polling even higher?
It would be wonderful if I could say it's just because of the political education, because of civic education. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to tell you this, because you shouldn't believe it. It's because we have only a very small amount of political civic education, at least at the schools. So of course we were Germans, or Germany. I think we could be proud, and we were proud of having no Nazi party, no right-wing party in the German Bundestag until Sunday, this next election. So we were very proud about this. But it's probably not due, unfortunately, I cannot tell you that it's due to political education or civic education. I think it's the history, of course, of Germany. So we have, there is the impact in the idea that we shouldn't be fond of certain positions, and we managed it to make it real, to happen what Franz Josef Strauss always told the people: there should be no democratic party on the right side from the conservatives, from the CDU and from the CSU. And the problem is that I think, so I wouldn't agree with the position. I think we had the problem that we had a migration policy, a refugee policy for the last 2 years, and we didn't have a party in the Bundestag or in any of the Länder parliaments which with opposition to this migration policy. We had 90% of the members of the Bundestag at least didn't oppose the migration policy and refugee policy. And on the other hand, we had most of the German newspapers and most of the broadcast stations, they were also at least not against this migration policy. And this, I think, this left enough space for the so-called alternative to tell the people we are really the alternative for Germany. So I see this issue, and I see a relation. I think the changes of the conservative parties, of the conservative party, not to be any conservative anymore with regard to migration policy. I wrote my master thesis about asylum policy in the and I wrote it in the 80s, unfortunately, quite a long time ago. And when I had a look at the former migration policy to Germany, so the way of talking about migrants of the conservatives, that's now the way of talking about migrants, the so-called AfD.
It certainly changed. Perhaps now would be a good time to open up to the audience. If anyone has a question, you can raise your hand now. And yes, over there. Oh, no, Olaf, right behind you.
I wondered, the AfD, how do they look at the European Union? Because actually, Germany has realized its the European Union as its economical sphere of influence, and it's also a reason for its wealth. So somehow they have realized Mittel-Europa, especially after the Brexit. What is their point of view on this, on the German power within the European Union, and what does the SPD think about more solidarity with the South and lowering down their own surplus in order to be able to share with the South of Europe?
So the AfD is quite a young party. You know that they were founded 2013. So very young party, and the reason for them to be founded and to have at least at the beginning certain, voters were quite fond of them, 4% last election, 4.7%. The only reason at the beginning, before the migration crisis, the so-called, was the European Union. And the position of the AfD is that they want Germany to leave the euro, that they want to go back to the Deutschmark, and that they want absolutely no solidarity, and they want, of course, to change migration policy as a whole, but not only migration policy. So the idea is to reduce the level of European integration very, very much. And of course, they have the same idea like we see it in the United States, not US first, but Germany first, and the others with quite a distance.
Mr. Ward, maybe the second question for you. What does the SPD think on lowering Germany's own surplus in order to be solidary with the South, with Greece, Spain, Italy?
I think that Martin Schulz has a lot in common in this area with Macron, the French president. They both would love to have a European budget, which with a kind of redistribution permanently. That's a very big difference with the CDU, Merkel and Schäuble, her finance minister, although we don't know if he is returning in the new coalition. But Merkel is very aware that there is critical support for the euro and for the European integration and for sharing more competences. So I think that's the difference. Yeah. Not for Schulz, he will spend much more money, but Merkel will try to organize a compromise, because that's very important, to arrange something. And she is also very aware of the problems with the high unemployment in the South. So I expect that they will organize a kind of investment fund. And the French, they are always very strong in gestures and beautiful words for it, solidarity funds or something like that. And then the Germans will pay a part of their trade surplus in the fund, but it won't
there will be no redistribution.
A permanent redistribution.
Right. Okay. We're talking about criticism that Merkel is facing, and Merkel is certainly no stranger to criticism, even within her own faction. In 2015, when she somehow single-handedly in her party opened up the gates of Germany, if you will, to over 1 million migrants, that didn't really help her in terms of support within her own party. Why did she do it?
So that's one of the biggest questions most Germans have. So until now, we don't know why she did it. You mean to open the borders? That was your question.
To take this stance, yes.
So one idea is that it was a reaction with regard to she was in a television in the television and having a discussion with a young refugee, and afterwards the public told that, oh, she has no heart. Angela Merkel doesn't have a heart, and some say she wanted to prove that she has a heart. So we don't know that for sure, but it was a humanitarian stand and a point of view, and I think that wasn't the problem. The problem for the public, or at least for part of the public, was that they didn't find a better way than to say how we are going on after September or October 2015. So I think that was the issue. Nobody had a problem to react to this Hungarian non-policy in migration issue.
And criticism came not only from within Germany, but also a lot of her counterparts, her European counterparts, criticized her for her position. Now, something that someone pointed out in the preparation for this interview, and I thought this was a very good question, in some ways, Germany was trying to defend European values by being open, correct? But in another way, didn't this response undermine a common European response?
So I think the problem for the other European countries is that the Germans always try to tell others how to behave. So at least that's my point of view, that we sometimes, we always tell people that they have to do their homework. I don't think that this is the adequate way of talking to other member states, that they have to do their homework. So we tell this to our children, but not to other member states on the same level. And I think, so that's the problem, how to, not to tell people or other member states which are the core values of the European integration or the European Union, and to change this without talking to the others. I think that's the problem perhaps for this German position in the European Union.
Yeah, Mr. Vart, do you agree with this assessment?
Well, the Germans are, of course, the biggest financiers, creditors of the European Union. So when the countries got into problems, the South, it was logical that they had quite a severe say. Although I must say that all the reform programs for the south of Europe, which each country, Greece, Italy, Spain and Portugal, they didn't do anything in for example, reforms in the labor market or things like that. So they were very much in need to reform their own economy. And in Italy, you see nowadays that it didn't do hardly anything.
Okay. Well, but with the statement that Merkel's leadership Merkel taking this leadership by opening the gates to 1 million refugees, did it undermine a common European response?
No, I think there is, of course, a problem because there isn't a European policy for migration. But what you also see at the same time, that the divisions were already there. We see in Poland and Hungary that this development in a kind of, well, you cannot say undemocratic, because the governments are chosen by the people with an overwhelming majority, which can make lots of parties jealous in our side of Europe. But this liberal tone and these provocations to the judicial system and everything that has to, it's a big reckoning of basically what we call the 60s and values that were created over there. So the divisions are already there.
Yeah, so the divisions were already there, and we've really seen difficulties of Europe to find a common European response to the migrant flows within Europe. So we've seen that Angela Merkel has tried to tackle the problem also outside the European borders. In your book, you mentioned that Merkel is trying to reach investment agreements with African countries right now to further develop their economies. Do you think this could be a European solution for the long run?
that depends how much money it costs for the different countries.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of countries. She suggested the idea also at the G20, so the most powerful economies in the world. So I think she is very much involved in this plan, and she succeeded. At least, it's an amazing task, to be honest, because it's a pretty mess in the north of Africa. Countries like Libya, Egypt, they are pretty unstable. So first there has to be political stability, which she cannot influence.
Yeah.
Although, I must say, you can expect after she has been re-elected, and she wants to make a deal with Macron that in the security area, in the area of European defense, they will try to strengthen the European cooperation, and that also has to do with Africa and stabilizing situations in difficult countries like Mali and Sudan. And
Emmanuel Macron has only been in office for a few months now.
Yeah.
Yes, his polls are showing that the people are not that happy with him. But if Merkel gets a new term, and I think most would agree that's very likely to happen, will we see a new era of Europe? Ms. Münch, maybe you can take this one.
That depends on the coalition. When we have a coalition together in Germany, together conservatives with the liberals, that will not be helpful for Monsieur Macron. When we have a grand coalition, so that probably would be, for a French point of view, much more helpful. But by the way, his main problem are the French unions and not Angela Merkel, but or her coalition partners. But I think it depends on their partners.
And you would say that if Schulz were to win, let's just say in this hypothetical scenario, would that be even better for Macron and his plans?
Which one?
If Martin Schulz was to win the elections.
So he will not win the elections, but if he would win the elections, yes, of course, that would be perhaps, at least for the first month, it would be a kind of idea, a new emotions with regard to the European Union, but with regard to the economic policy and to the economic fortune of both countries, Germany and France, I'm not sure whether he will be so successful with regard to the financial markets and so whatever. So I think for French perspective, and not only probably for France, a grand coalition would have certain advantages.
Yeah. Maybe we can take another audience question right now. Yes, here.
So, hello. I have one huge question to you. Would you say that it would be...
Can you please stick to one question?
Would you say it would be more reasonable, both in terms of economic predictability and free trade, to get rid of the euro and the central bank, but remain all the economic borders, have one single market, and trade and use with and use all the national currencies for each separate nation?
Mr. Ward, would it be profitable to get rid of the euro? Is that your question?
I don't think it's profitable. Of course, there was the big peace argument for organizing the European Union. But another one was, of course, very important. That's the economic argument. And if you look at Europe, there are so very many countries with so very many borders and so very many currencies. So business was very much in favor of, of this internal market, and it still is. And to be honest, the internal market, it's only halfway. The work should be finished with a digital internal market, for example. And that expansion could lead to a lot of jobs. But that means that's very severe for a lot of countries, because they must get rid of all kind of internal inefficiencies in their own economy. And we are living in an era after the financial crisis, where lots of people are very anti-globalism. So,
Yeah. Maybe another audience question, maybe someone else. Yes, here in the front. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question to the notion that Angela Merkel is the leader of the free world, which you connected to the statement that she's very principled, referring to the migration policy, referring to the Energiewende. And wouldn't you say that it's exactly the opposite? I mean, think about the Energiewende. She changed 180 degrees after the explosion of Fukushima, reacting to the pressure of the public. Migration crisis, the same. We have in Germany, a very humanistic approach. There was also a lot of pressure there, and she changed 180 degrees. And after the attacks, after the riots in Köln, she changed 180 degrees back and became very rigid. So isn't it then more reasonable to say she's a manager of the free world? And thinking about it, that we need a strong leadership, isn't then she maybe someone who will not be able to lead us to make reformations that are difficult to present to the public?
yeah, it's, you know, all these phrases, leader of the free world. Of course, she is not the manager of the free world. Maybe the United States are still the manager of, well, free world. Well, that's a difficult one. But there is no real manager of the free world. And Angela Merkel isn't even the manager of Europe. She is a crisis manager, and she had a lot of influence. But all the divisions we still have in Europe is because of the lack of a manager that is in charge of Europe. We have a lot of countries, 27, that are member of the European Union. Well, Great Britain is already did left. So, maybe that's important to say. She is, that phrase, leader of the free world, also has to do with her. She is a bridge. She is somebody who wants to build bridges, for example, to Russia. She was very much disappointed. Well, disappointed is a soft way of putting it, about the annexation of the Crimea and almost the eastern part of Ukraine. So she's very much in favor of stability and this peace process that should be installed in the eastern part of Europe. Then she's very much involved by diplomacy, international diplomacy by telephone, that in North Korea, that she prevents Trump, our ally. She calls him still the main ally of the United States and Europe, which is true because America is, of course, a very strong country, but it has become very unreliable because of this strange president. So she's very much involved in having a peaceful solution for this Mr. Kim.
Ms. Munch, I saw you expressing some disagreements when Mr. Ward said that Angela Merkel is just bridge builder.
Yes. So I think it was an interesting question talking about these really big policy changes. And that was your point, to talk about first the Energiewende, then the so-called refugee crisis, and whether she's, some people say she is, the Chancellor is the solution to these problems, and some say she's the reason for these problems. So you can really have a good discussion about this, what's the real point. So her opponents from the AfD, for example, and the electorates in favor of the AfD, they say she is the reason why we have these problems. She's now solving. So that's a wonderful discussion.
What would you say?
But even if they get 15% of the votes.
Hopefully not. 11%
Yeah,
would be enough.
You never know. then it's only 15% of the Germans that are that don't agree with her policy.
Oh, so we have also, don't forget the other parts of people who vote in another way, who vote for the AfD, but who vote, for example, for the conservatives in Bavaria, the CSU, the so-called sister party. They aren't sisters, they are really strong enemies in most, at least in the migration policy, also in the Energiewende. So people don't want to follow, not all people want to follow the populists, but there are a lot of people against this policy changes.
Yeah. So would you say Angela Merkel is not a bridge builder at all, but because she also doesn't manage to reunify the CSU and the CDU?
She has a talent to be, in some ways, she is a certain kind of bridge builder, and I'm not an opponent of her. I think she does things really sometimes very good, but nevertheless, she is sometimes also the reason for some problems, and it's very difficult to form bridges now to the CSU. They have a bridge with regard to the elections. But on Monday we will see starting, or we will see it already on Sunday evening, we will start to have the discussion between the so-called sister parties, the two conservative parties, about the limit for migration, for the number of migrants coming to Germany. And that will be a very, very big issue, because the CSU tells everybody that they don't want to join a coalition without this, this limit of migrants.
Yeah, would you say it was a smart move of Angela Merkel not to address this in her party program, so she could gain votes from both sides?
I think that was quite a smart move. It was a kind of consensus between both parties, not to talk too much about in public, not to talk too much about in the common program, but to source it out in the Bavarian program. So we have in the Bavaria plan of the CSU, we have this issue, and we have this topic for the Bavarian voters, but it's very difficult for the people to bridge it, or for the parties to bridge it, and the bridge will be under really stress starting on Sunday evening.
Yeah. Talking about the leading role internationally of Angela Merkel, the role Germany has taken nowadays is referred to in an article by the Foreign Policy as Pax Germanica. Mr. Ward, do you think this is a complete overstatement?
Yes. Basically, she has to prove it, if that's true. It could be, but
it's not true yet.
No, I don't see it. You?
But do you see why some analysts might think that Germany's role in the world, politically, culturally, and obviously economically, is so large at this point that they are in somewhat of a leading role?
Of course, it's the disappointment about all developments we have in the Western world with regard to, especially with regard to the United States. So there's a certain kind of disappointment, but of course, Germany will never be able to replace anything like the United States. Not even a European Union will be. Yeah. So, and I think there's no German politicians who tries to do this.
Yeah. Why do you think this will never be possible for Europe to catch up with the US?
So there are so many reasons for this, to answer this. So one of the reasons is, of course, the question about the euro. So of course the Germans, many Germans profit a lot from this common from the currency and from the euro. But of course, we also know that it's one of the reasons why it's so difficult for the European Union to form a union, a real union, because there are so many differences with regard to economic efforts, with regard to who profits more from the euro. So I think that's one of the main reasons. And of course, we have a lot of economists who say it's a nice idea for peace, but it's not a good idea for economy. And the other reason, of course, are these very different attitudes from the European Union with regard to how how strong and how important is the nation state, and how strong should be the union, the European Union. And so we have so many different attitudes towards this, and people don't agree with the German way of ever stronger European Union.
But perhaps in cultural terms, one could say that Germany is now in a leading role because we now have a president in the US, Donald Trump, who doesn't believe in climate change, which is unheard of in Europe, but it's a somewhat common position in the Republican Party. In that way, perhaps not on the political stage, but maybe there are Americans who are now saying our government isn't doing anything for the climate. Canada is too small a country, and the one country that comes to mind to a lot of people is Germany. Maybe you
but
could
that's
weigh in on
not
this.
the hardcore of politics, because we didn't talk about military, but the United States is a superpower with nuclear arsenal, and so if there are any international conflicts or whatever, they have some clouds. Europe is a peaceful continent.
On the other hand, we've also seen Angela Merkel saying that the times when we can trust others to the fullest are long gone. We Europeans need to take our destiny in our own hands. What do you think she wants to achieve by that?
She wants to achieve that the people will support her hastening of the defense budget, because there are hardly any countries who fulfill their obligations to NATO, 2% of the total production, to put that in the NATO.
Which, of course, would be very, very hard for a lot of states that are part of NATO.
Well, here you must also be honest. After the fall of the wall, it was amazing how easily all the governments in Europe quit the defense budget, cut the defense budget, and put redistributed all the money in the social security field. That's, of course, that's the reason why in France people still can go with pension at 55, which is basically a little bit silly.
Right. Okay. Perhaps we can take a few more audience questions before we come to the conclusion of this interview. Yes, right there in the front. We'll get there.
Right, so of course we all know that the Green and the Left Party are pretty low in terms of votes. Well, the Lefts aren't, but the Greens are relatively low. Still, I haven't heard a lot about any topics regarding climate change, the reform of retirement policy, anything like that. Also in this interview, do you think it's because those topics are not going to be deciding, or do you think that those topics will be brought up in coalition talks, and that a coalition, for example, with the Green Party, is still possible?
So I think that's a very important point, of course, that we didn't talk a lot too much about the smaller parties, or nothing, and not about the smaller parties. The climate change policy is an important issue, I think, for most of the German parties. Simply perhaps with regard to migration policy. So all of us know that we will not fight the reasons for migration and for refugees to come to Europe without probably a climate policy. So most of the parties know that, and I think even the liberals talk a little bit about climate change and not too much, but for the Green Party, so that's of course interesting, and that's typical for a coalition government. Every party says we don't want to form a coalition without having this perspective chosen in, and for the Greens, the climate change, the climate policy is of course a very big issue, and they wouldn't form, and that probably is one of the main difficulties to combine with the liberal, the migration policy, European integration, and also perhaps the climate policy. This would be really problems to form a coalition.
Yeah. Regarding the stance of the Liberal Party on the issue of climate change, what would you say is their stance? Because there's very controversial rumors or very controversial stances within their party.
So for them, it's not the biggest and not the most important issue. I think that's one of the main differences, and they don't want to spend much money for it, and they want to have the market solution.
True liberals.
And the question is, how do we find a market solution for climate change or against climate change? So probably that's one of the main issues. So they don't want to spend money on this. They have other topics which are more important for.
Thank you. Perhaps one more question back there.
Hello. Okay. First of all, thank you so much for making this possible. It was a very fruitful discussion. I'd like to ask kind of a personal question to all of you four people. What change do you hope to see the most coming out of these elections?
Ooh, that's a very good question.
Maybe you can start from the left. Yeah.
So my idea is I'm quite a little bit afraid of some changes, and I think, of course, the biggest change will be not with regard to the government, but with regard to the parliament. And of course, I'm quite a bit afraid of having this right-wing party in the German Bundestag, and I'm afraid about how we deal with this populist party, because we are not used to it until now, and how this will change the way of parliamentary discussions and of course also of public discussion, because we have now to integrate them in every discussion in the television. Perhaps if we have to integrate them. We make in the academy, we have a lot of politicians coming, and until now I didn't have to invite them. No. And I have to invite them in future.
Mr. Ward?
Basically, I hope that there will be a coalition that wants to start renewals, and that I think that's only possible if Merkel starts a coalition with the Liberal Party and with the Greens. Very many Germans would say immediately, that's impossible. But in the Netherlands, we are used to very strange coalitions, as we know, these days. So I think in Germany, politicians are looking a lot to the Netherlands, because what's happening here, they know 10 years later, it can happen with them. So the rise of Pim Fortuyn and Wilders, well, they are very aware of that. But I think the renewal has to come from this coalition, because it seems to be, everything seems to be okay in Germany. The economic growth and unemployment is diminishing. But what this coalition and also the former coalition didn't do is reform the own economy. And then I mean we talked about infrastructure, but what is very important is the digitalization of the economy and of society. It's amazingly that you sit in trains and cannot reach the internet. The Netherlands is one big city, in our opinion. Yeah. The East doesn't agree.
Yeah.
But
Germany is 25th in digitalization. That's
yes,
correct.
and in Germany there are very big parts. There are very big rural parts, which don't, where there isn't a very speedy internet, which is for the Mittelstand, the smaller and bigger companies, a very big problem. So if Germany wants to be secure of continuous economic growth and the social market economy, which Merkel says she is very much in favor to stimulate the social market economy, it really should make a very big investment and use the, in my opinion, use the surplus for that.
Yeah. So we need to have to build future economy and future industry within Germany, I guess. Actually, your question was also our last question, so now we're short on that one.
So thanks for that.
Do you think we will see Merkel pass over the crown? Is there any chance that she will not win this Sunday? Mr. Ward?
If there is any possibility that she will, well, if there is an attack or something, but that's very
I mean, back in
unusual.
2002, this happened before, right? Where the Social Democrats were just on the verge of not winning, and then just within the last week, they ascended, and then all of a sudden Gerhard Schröder won the presidency.
But
so this
we
has
had a
happened
flood before,
But
so
who
there's
knows?
no
Who
flood
knows? Who
until
knows?
Sunday.
Okay, so it's not going to happen. Well, maybe before concluding the interview, I want to remind you that next week we will not have any interviews at Room for Discussion due to the midterms, but we will be back the week after with Klaas Knot, the president of the Dutch Central Bank, so make sure to be there as well. The interview will be on Wednesday, October 4th, from 12 to 1 p.m. For now, let's give a warm round of applause for Ms. Mönch and Mr. Ward.
Thank you.